page for JSON.org, and I described the standard in 3 different ways: informal English, railroad diagrams, and McKeeman form grammar. And my hope was that everybody who read that page would understand at least one of those, and maybe multiple of them, and that would help everybody to have a common understanding of what JSON was. And that worked. That's been very effective. I've seen very few conflicts or confusions about what JSON is or isn't. Because there was very little English on that page is really easy to translate. And so lots of people all over the world have offered translations to the JSON website. So if you need any of these languages to describe what JSON is, it's there. And if anyone watching is fluent in a language which is not on this list, and you'd like to help out, that would be great. I'd really appreciate that. So the next thing that happened was there was a competing standard called YAML. And YAML came out of the not XML community. They were very disgusted with how complicated XML had gotten and how bizarre, and they thought there's a much better way of doing data formatting, which turns out it was true. It also turned out that there was a subset of YAML which was almost compatible with JSON. And so they approached me and suggested that if we make a couple of minor changes to each of our standards, we can have a pure subset relationship, which would be a really useful thing. That would mean that anybody who's using JSON could use all of the YAML tools if it turns out that those tools would be useful to them. So the points of contention on the JSON side were single quote strings, because YAML used those in a very different way in terms of how they escaped them. And also comments. YAML didn't like comments the way that JSON did. And it turns out that comments should not have been in JSON in the first place, because it's a data interchange format. You're sending information from one program to another. The programs are not going to read the comments, so putting comments on the wire is just a waste of bandwidth. So they really shouldn't have been there. That didn't follow the minimalism principle. Also, I found that there were people who were starting to put parsing instructions in the comments, which would have broken interoperability, which was the whole point. The thing I wanted to do with JSON was to allow programs written in any language to communicate with programs written in any other language. And if there were specific techniques or conditions that are described in comments, then that breaks interoperability, which would be a bad thing. And then finally, I noticed that in implementing JSON parsers, the most complicated part of them was the comments, which was not because the comments are very complicated, but just because the rest of JSON is so incredibly simple. And so by getting rid of the comments, it made it easier to parse, and that made it easier for people in other language communities to use JSON as well. So I removed the single quote strings in the comments, and that was the last change to the JSON standard. I then wrote RFC 4627, the MIME media type for JSON, for IETF. So the purpose of this RFC was to get a MIME type for JSON, because I thought that would make it easier for people to use JSON in applications that cared about MIME types. And the type that I petitioned for was text.json. I thought that would be the right thing, because JSON is a text format. It exists only as text, and text is shorter than application, so I like that a lot. Unfortunately, IETF said, no, it's got to be application/JSON, which is much longer and much uglier, and it's inexcusable, and I'm sorry, it's the best I could get for you. I think you deserved better. Obviously, you deserved better. But looking at it now in hindsight, JSON has become so important that I think it should be a top-level type in MIME. So we should be able to, and then have more specialized JSON types following after that. So we should have things like JSON/geo or JSON/money, or things like that, but that's not my job. So this is the history of JSON adoption versus XML adoption according to Google. So you can go to Google Trends and type in JSON, XML, and you will get this graph. And this shows the history of interest, according to Google, in these two concepts over time. Google's data begins at 2004, so we can't see things that happened before 2004 on this graph. We don't see the introduction of XML in 1998 and its rapid ascent. And that ascent was driven by a cartel of IT companies that were developing expensive XML tooling and consulting services and so on, and that ramped it up really quickly. Also, you don't see the introduction of JSON in 2002, but I can tell you exactly what that data looks like. It's a flat line. There was virtually no interest in 2002, 2003, 2004 in JSON. It was just very steady. That changed in 2005 when AJAX happened. Jesse James Garrett published an article that suggested a new way of writing web applications. It turns out it wasn't a new way, it was